From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here on a Monday. We're coming to you live and direct. A good show on tap. I do hope you had a good weekend, enjoyed the beautiful weather. Feels like fall already. Summer officially ends tomorrow morning, Leland tells me. And I'm ready for some cooler temps, but I'm going to miss summer. I'm never a big fan of all of a sudden getting to be real short days and really cold. But right now, it's darn nice out there. So anyway, thanks for joining us on this Monday morning. As you know, one of the big stories here in the city of Nashville, something that people are talking about not just locally, but outside this region as well. Just seeing the fact that a city has passed and moved forward with a 34% property tax increase, something during a pandemic that has some people saying, no, now's not a good time. Others saying, yes, this is what's needed. We don't want to raise taxes in this way, but we have no choice considering the financial status of the city. We've heard from folks who have been on the show in recent weeks talking about why they don't think it's a good idea to increase those property taxes. This morning, we're not hearing so much from those advocating for it as much as those who will be affected by it. And I'm not just talking about the taxpayer themselves, but the various departments here in Metro. And we thought we would lay it out with some of the directors of some of the big departments on what things are like for them financially and what the importance of a property tax, whether it's an increase or not one this large, means to the services they provide all of us. So let's get into that. We'll open up the phone lines. We're also streaming live on Facebook, and I'll be following along there if some of you have comments or questions along those lines. Specifically questions. I know many of you will sound off saying, no, now's not a good time for a tax, and you're more than welcome to share that. But as far as any questions you may have for some of our guests, I'd be glad to share them as well if you have something specific. I'll introduce them in order of what we're going to see this morning. We'll be joined in just a moment by William Herbert, Director for the Metro Codes Department, to talk about what his department does and what this tax increase will mean. William Swan, who's the Chief of the Nashville Fire Department, will be on after him. And then Kent Oliver, Director of the Metro Public Library System, will be on. All three of them, Metro agencies that run very important parts of this city. So we'll get into that now, and let's start it off with William Herbert, Director of the Metro Codes Department. Good morning, sir. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can. Good morning, Nick. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on this morning as Director of the Codes Department. I thought maybe we would just set this off for folks, perhaps, who aren't entirely clear of what Codes does. If you could talk about the tasks that you deal with on a daily basis there in your department.
Sure. So everybody sees the building and construction that takes place in Nashville. We're all aware of that. But here's some things that we do that you may not be aware of. And so we're really important in maintaining our neighborhoods. And so what we do is we respond to complaints regarding junk, trash, and debris, abandoned vehicles, dilapidated structures, high grass and weeds. We're kind of getting out of that season now, but that's a really big one for us during the summer months. So it's those types of property standard issues that are on private property within the neighborhoods that we're responsible for seeking compliance with Metro's codes. So what we do there is when we receive a complaint, we have an inspector that goes out and takes a look at the property that is the subject of the complaint. We notify that property owner. We give them a reasonable amount of time in which to correct that situation. If they don't, then we write a warrant to environmental court, and then we prosecute the case in environmental court. So there's that process. Also, what we do is, like I said, everybody's aware of the construction in Nashville, and I'll say this, is that even with COVID, in our last fiscal year, we exceeded the highest ever in terms of building valuation for Metro Nashville, and we came in at just over $4.4 billion worth of construction value in Nashville in the last fiscal year. Like I said, and that's even with COVID. So what we do is we issue building permits at the Codes Department. We then conduct all the inspections relative to that construction. And so that is the building inspections, as well as the electrical, the plumbing, and the gas mechanical inspections. We do all of that. And then at the end of that process, when the building is up, then we're the department that ultimately issues the final use and occupancy letter upon completion of the final building inspection. And that's to ensure that the buildings that are being built comply with the international building codes.
Okay.
Also, what we do is, we do is we enforce short-term rentals.
Yeah.
The Airbnbs.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And so, and I'll say this: we've got Nashville. We worked really hard on our short-term rental enforcement, and we're right now at a 92.3% compliance rate, which I would say is the highest compliance rate for any city in the United States for a city our size. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Boy, and nice job describing that. I dare say in a city as actively growing as the city of Nashville, you are probably a codes department every bit as busy of any department of any size city in the entire country. And so a lot going on. So let's just get to the heart of the issue. If you could address this for some of our viewers, you obviously pay attention, and you know that there are many folks out there that are concerned about this 34% property tax increase that was passed. And you think, well, not now, or it's too much along those lines. And I'm not going to get into whether or not you feel it's too much or too little, but can you talk about the importance of the revenue that will come from this and what will happen if it's cut, if this referendum succeeds and either this goes away completely or is a small portion of what's passed at this point?
Sure. So the mayor's office has done some analysis and said that if the referendum passes, then each of our departments will have to look at what amounts to a 35% budget cut. Now, so what does that look like for the codes department if that were enacted tomorrow? What that means for the codes department is that we would have to reduce our staff by 42%. So currently we have 118 employees, and we'd have to reduce that number to 68 employees. So what does that mean? Well, for us, that means that our inspection times, and that's for property standards and all of our building inspections, which are currently running at about 2-day service, would be substantially increased. So in the short run, what we would expect to see would be a double in the amount of time that our inspections would take place. So immediately we would see what went from a 2-day turnaround to a 4-day turnaround. And then as each day then progresses and we get further and further behind, that's going to grow exponentially until in short order, it'll be where we will simply not be able to perform what I would determine to be an acceptable level of service.
Okay, and so that effect, I think, with the way you described it, codes, I think, in a large measure, at least in my opinion, has a lot to do with the quality of life in any city. It just does, from tall grass to enforcing Airbnb rules to things like this that people have a concern with. So tangibly, with those delays on inspections, which can be a big pain for a lot of folks, does that mean someone then who calls because their neighbor hasn't mowed their lawn in 5 weeks and it looks like a jungle and it's attracting rodents and things like this, they call to complain to you? How will that affect your response?
So it'll be a substantial response. So if someone were to call in today, we would record that call. More than likely, the inspector would be on scene tomorrow. If the violation was observed, we would then tomorrow send out a notice in the mail to the owner of that property to cut their grass or clean it up. We have to give them a reasonable amount of time to do that. So, we're looking at 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, depending on how severe it is and the situation involved. But then we'll go back and have to re-inspect and see if they've cut their grass. And so what then again would be, a 2-day turnaround on that re-inspection. Over time, it's going to be substantially more than that. So By the time we were able to get back to it, I don't know, it may be 10 days later, something like that. The grass continued to grow. We see the violation. We then have to write a warrant into environmental court that then has to be served by the sheriff's department and a court date set. Long and short of this is it could literally be months before we get a court order ordering the person to cut their grass. And then if they fail to do that, then we have to cite them again, bring them back into court, and pursue contempt. We ask the judge to order that they cut their grass, and if they don't, then it's a possible remedy of jail time.
Okay. And yeah, so it's all a matter of how much time it's going to take. And obviously, the more that drags on, the more that affects the neighborhood. You know, there are going to be some who say, look, all right, we hear what Mr. Herbert's saying, but these are just scare tactics. I mean, he could find a way to, you know, cut back corners here and there, and it wouldn't be as bad as he says. You know, how would you respond to folks like that? Or they may say, you know what, well, maybe codes is real important, but why don't we cut from some other departments and leave codes alone? And maybe you can talk about just how that works when you talk about budgets within a city.
Right. So for the codes department, we did last year over 176,000 inspections, and we have 118 employees. To reduce our number of inspectors by something approaching 50% is really going to be dramatic. It's something that everybody in Nashville, all citizens are gonna feel. So it's, you know, whether it's the short-term rentals, whether it's you know, unsightly conditions or unhealthy conditions really within neighborhoods, or whether it's just the building and construction industry, for us not being able to provide the service that we need to provide, I think it will be felt by everybody in the city. And you say codes and you think, oh, well, that's just building and construction. But the point I really want to make here is it's not. It's your neighborhoods that are at stake here. So, you know, for us to have to, I don't know that we could even give you the amount of turnaround. We're already, as a department, we're already operating on a shoestring budget, and we have been for years. During the last budget cycle, we were told that we could get 10 additional employees, and then the budget situation hit, and so we've not been able to get those 10 employees. So we're still, you know, operating on the same number of this department's still operating with the same number of employees that it did substantially 10 years ago. We've not been able to grow as a department as Nashville has grown, and it's tough for us. So we've tried to use technology to make ourselves more efficient. If we're not going to be able to get more manpower, then we just have to be smarter at what we do. And so again, we've not had any increases to speak of in the last 10 years in terms of personnel or anything else. So we're already operating on a shoestring, and to reduce the budget by 35% and reduce our staff by 42% is going to be a tough thing for this department to do.
That's interesting, as you said then. So really not a substantial increase of any type in the past decade?
That's correct. We just haven't. And so it's not for lack of asking either. And like I say, this with the new administration that came in with this mayor and with the new council that we've got, we were told and council recommended that we would get 10 additional employees. But then as we remember, going back, 6 months ago when the budget situation really arose, and then there was a hiring freeze in Metro, we couldn't promote, we couldn't hire, so we were frozen there, and we've remained frozen. So it's going to be tough for us. It's already tough for this department now, and really trying to imagine what it would look like to have to reduce our staff by something approaching 50% is really tough for us. So, I mean, we'll do the best we can with what we've got. We've done that for years, and we'll continue to do so. But I don't know how we'll be able to manage it, quite frankly.
Gotcha. Listen, William Herbert, I really appreciate your candor this morning coming on and talking about what the budget means and the situation with this tax increase to Metro codes. We're going to hear from some other department heads after you leave us here, but I want to thank you for joining us this morning. I really do. Thank you. I hope that paints a picture. Some people will say, okay, that makes sense. Others will say, you know, try to do it smarter and save money, which it sounds like you're doing. But, you know, I hope people listened at least to hear what you're saying one way or the other. You don't like taxes any more than anyone else, do you?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I'm very, very sympathetic to it.
Yeah.
But I've got a department to run. I've got a job to do, and I've got an obligation to the folks of Nashville, and I just need to be able to do it to the best of my ability.
Gotcha. Sir, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and perhaps we'll talk again as we see how this plays out, all right?
Thank you so very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. That's William Herbert, Director for the Metro Codes Department, laying out his take on what it would mean if that property tax increase does not happen. And then, well, as I said, we've got two more department heads coming up next. As long as we can get the hookup, we'll be joined by Chief William Swan. He's with the Nashville Fire Department, all right? So if you don't really understand what codes does, or maybe don't care, and if you don't, well, that's on you, because codes are very important. Fire is pretty self-explanatory, and we'll hear from the fire chief right after this. Stay with us.